So most of you who have been following this channel up until now have noticed that I'm trying to play with a little bit of a niche and trying to see where this channel will go. And recently I've noticed a good amount of traction, no pun intended, when it comes to me just talking about something in car news that's a little bit interesting. I always adjust this mic in the middle of my filming. So one of the things I try to do daily is read something interesting that's coming out in car news or related to automotive engineering or whatever it is, and something that piques my interest, I talk to you guys and girls about it. The bit of news that caught my attention this week is, as you can see in the title, the release of the Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. Now, speaking of people who have been following me along on this channel, you'll probably also notice that I talk a lot about Porsches and I talk very highly about them. I am not pretending for 1 minute that I don't want to be hired by Porsche, that I don't want to be an ambassador, that I don't want to work for their medical team or whatever it is. Of course I want to. I'm a human being. I'm not going to pretend that that's not true. I also know that the YouTube sphere, when it comes to anybody starting out in anything, when it comes to product reviews or when it comes to being an ambassador for a brand, there's a lot of shilling going on. All of that is to say that I also want to be completely honest and be sort of an independent contractor of sorts. Anyway, more on that in a bit. Let's talk about this Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. The fact that this thing has been taken to the GT department for Porsche, I mean, they have a reputation to maintain, so clearly this thing is going to perform unsurprisingly. Its 0 to 60 is 3.1 seconds, which is under-reporting. It's probably faster, and it has been faster according to test drives from Car and Driver and Road and Track and whatnot. Their entire engine's completely rebuilt. It's up from the mid-500s to 631 horsepower. It's got reinforced connecting rods. It's got a rebuilt crankshaft. It's got more platinum in its fuel injectors. All of this producing more power. Oh, not to mention slightly larger turbines on their turbochargers. All of this is creating a significant increase in power and torque and its delivery within the power band. The chassis is obviously produced by the GT department, so it's stiffer, it's more responsive. It's getting to a point where reporters are saying it's competing with their typical GT cars. Never mind the fact that it could potentially outperform the Urus or the DBX or the Bentayga, although that's not necessarily a performance car. But all of this culminates into an SUV that can do the Nurburgring in 7 minutes and 38 seconds, which is remarkable for any car, let alone a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT. And this is not only remarkable, but it is 1,000% tone deaf and pointless. One of the things you'll notice if you read these reviews and you look at the photos, when you look at the interior photos, there's a hell of a lot of Alcantara. If you look at the specs of the car and you look at what it's classified as, it's a 4-seater SUV. So it's not even 5 seats. So forget about the fact that the size of the car inside is not any different from a typical sedan, but it's 4 seats. The back seats are bucket seats. It's a car built size-wise to go off-road and is being more and more and more engineered towards a car like their GT cars, a car that's meant to perform on a track. They're lowering the ride height and trying to shave off weight here and there. How about the entire body? That's a lot of weight. I'm going on this rant to get to a particular point. And this is going to get really boring, and I know it's going to get into environmental stuff, and I'm not necessarily a complete blind proponent of electric propulsion. You probably have already inferred that from my other videos, but I need to make a particular point here. The International Energy Association mentioned in 2019 a couple of kind of jarring statistics. From 2018, there was a drop of about 2% in total internal combustion engine sales worldwide. In 2019, that dropped by about 14%. Granted, China had a huge role to play in that because a lot of their cars ended up being electric. And a number, like the top 20 car manufacturers are shifting a huge proportion of their cars to electric. All makes sense. I get it. Now, there's a separate argument to be made about whether or not the car industry or the passenger transport industry really is the biggest proponent to pollution and whatnot. I know there's a debate out there, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of other areas that we could be changing before attacking the car industry. And I do commend the fact that the Formula sport industry and the fact that car manufacturers in general are playing along by doing their part so that the spotlight can be taken off of them. But here are some other statistics. In the last decade, the passenger transport vehicle share towards SUVs has doubled. Almost half of all car sales around the world are SUVs. And the number of sales of SUVs has gone from 35 million to 200 million. Now, there is something to be said about the fact that propelling an SUV or a heavy car like that with electric propulsion is not an easy thing. I totally get that. And the Cayenne Turbo GT is a 5,000 pound car. And I'm not just picking on the Cayenne Turbo GT. I'm picking on everything that car stands for. And I still love Porsche, and I'll make a point about that at the end of this. But here's a graph from the International Energy Association from that very same article showing the distribution of carbon emissions across the major contributors. And now this graph, the top is the power sector by a lot. But look at what's second. SUVs, which beats out heavy industry, trucks, aviation, and shipping. But there's another little tiny bit of the graph at the end, all other internal combustion engines. There's a lot to be said about that end of the graph, but let's start at the left. SUVs alone, not just passenger vehicles, SUVs among passenger vehicles. Now let's go to the right side of the graph. Internal combustion engines are the lowest by a significant amount, but they're in the negative. I understand that they're in the negative because of the contribution of electric vehicles and zero emission vehicles and hybrid vehicles and all of that. But I have a very strong feeling that if you were to remove all of that, given what we just mentioned about the numbers, the contribution of the electric vehicle market right now, I don't think is enough that if we were to take that away, that internal combustion in general would shoot to the left of the chart. Now, why am I so annoyed about this? Well, because this week has sucked and I'm in a bad mood. And I know there is a lot of controversy about this stuff, but look, and there's a lot of talk in these articles about the gigatons of CO2 that are being produced and all that. And I don't understand all of that stuff. I've never really looked into those specific chemical numbers, but there are numbers that are speaking directly to me that make sense, and it's not a complicated thing. People can say, oh, well, you know, there's nuances to that. Well, there's nuances to electric vehicles being produced, like the entire production process of making a battery and shipping it and all this stuff. There's nuances to everything, but I don't want to ignore what's obvious by saying, well, there's nuances to it, and just put it to the side, because all of these little cars, the compact and mid-sized cars, are trying really hard to be hybrid and electric. And then you have this thing and all of its brothers and sisters with no level of hybridity, with no real concern about emissions and fuel economy, which, by the way, the combined fuel economy of this car is 15 miles a gallon. And that would be a problem in and of itself if you had some utility in this vehicle. But every article coming out is sort of sarcastically talking about how pointless this thing is. So while we're sitting here clenched tight, waiting for the GT3 to be announced, hoping it won't be turbocharged, and up in arms about the fact that the Cayman and the Boxer line might go completely electric, and we're all upset about that and trying to console ourselves, there's a huge level of irresponsibility happening in another end. I think it needs to get to we can't complain about this stuff, but then also say, well, the market speaks. I think someone has to stand up and kind of just be like, no, we're going to stop selling these giant useless vehicles, which don't provide any more space, as we just determined. It's a 4-seater car. It's not even 5 seats. It's 4 seats. Doesn't provide any level of off-road ability, which these cars were supposed to in the first place. It's just a status symbol. It's literally people just buying it because it's bigger. I don't know. I hate ranting about this stuff, and I hate using YouTube as a platform to rant because there's a lot of opinions about a lot of different things. But this is just pointless. And the reason why it's upsetting me is because I'd like to get to a point in my life where I can enjoy a GT3 RS, as I've made painfully obvious in the past. I'd like to get to a point, and I hope companies like Porsche and Siemens and Bosch are genuinely making progress towards synthetic fuel that will remove the issue of emissions, and that things can potentially go back in the other direction. But we're continually shooting ourselves in the foot by doing things like this. There's never going to be a point where we get rid of the sport car or the supercar or the lightweight track car that's naturally aspirated. There's never going to get to a point where we remove that and say, well, at least we've got the sport SUV. I just can't help but wonder what the GT department was thinking at the time when they made this. Not saying they're crazy, but I wonder if there was any level of begrudging compliance when making a car like this. I don't know. Let me know what you think. There are certainly people out there who are more well-versed in a topic like this, experts out there. Comment. And I know this is a super small channel and I don't have much of a reach, which I guess plays to my benefit because I can just talk about this stuff to the people who are listening. But I don't know what difference it's gonna make. I just think we need synthetic fuel to really come through and make a big splash. I'll see you next time.